Well, hello, everybody. Hi. First, I want to congratulate everybody for being here. It takes a lot to come and listen to a survivor's story, listen to a lot of the pain that somebody has gone through, and to be in your position. I see a lot of young faces, and I was sitting at my table over in the corner saying that same thing, that there's a lot of youth. And it's really exciting to see that we have young people stepping up against injustices that are happening, not just with domestic violence, suicide, and mental health, but I do want to congratulate each and every one of you for being here. So thank you very much. Give yourselves a round of applause. Today, we're going to be covering a lot. You have notes. I will be answering questions at the end of this. So if you have questions, please come up to me, please ask. It's very important to get out what it is that you're feeling. So if something arises, write it down at the end. Like I said, I'll be answering questions. But we're really going to dive into things that happen and things that happen that maybe you may be unaware of. And there's a lot of horrific injustices that are going on the planet, including domestic violence and human trafficking. But our mental health, especially mixing with COVID and suicide statistics. But before I start talking about all of that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. Would that be okay with everyone? I do like interaction, so you can definitely talk back with me, okay? It's not a wall here, okay? So I like to break this to this third wall. So let's see, I'm just gonna dive right in. I was born to two amazing parents up in a small town called Sandpoint, Idaho. You haven't heard of it? It's about as small as here. So tiny, and everybody kind of knew everyone. And I grew up with loving parents. My mom and my dad were our backbone. My daddy was military, so we started moving around very quickly, and we were taught that we needed to rely on each other. My brother and myself changed schools roughly 8 or 9 different times in our adolescence. And my mom was always there to be our cheerleaders. Whatever it is that we wanted to do. When I was growing up, I wanted to go to the moon and be a scientist. And when I was growing up, I wanted to explore the world, go scuba diving, explore nature. And she would always say, go girl, you can do whatever it is that you want to do. And my daddy was the same way, always cheering us on. Well, about 16 years old, I am working my way through school, doing what it is that everybody tells you that you have to do in order to succeed. I was getting good grades. I was a straight A student, National Honors Society, honors roll, graduated with double honors, but I was missing something. I knew at this point in my life, my young life at this point, that I wanted something even more. Now, you sitting right here, how many of you want something even more? And that's why you're sitting here. You want change in our society. You want change in our world. You want something better for your generation and the generation coming behind you. Well, that's something even more for me was to move to Hollywood, California to be a movie star. So that's what I did. I packed up my car. I was living in North Idaho at the time, and I sold everything. And ladies, you can relate, except for my shoes and my clothes. So it was full to the brim with 50 pairs of shoes and all the clothes that I have in my closet. And I drove my happy little butt from North Idaho all the way down to Hollywood, California to pursue this glamorous dream of being a Hollywood movie star. And things were going really well. You know, I was starring in independent plays and doing some films. In the Northwest, Papa Murphy's is popular. I'm not so sure if it is here, but I did a Papa Murphy's commercial, and I really loved being in front of the camera. Things were going great. And then I ended up meeting somebody. I met this blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy who swept me off my feet. He was tall. He was an entrepreneur. He would tell me all the time how beautiful I was and how talented I was, although he had never seen me actually act. He courted me and sent me flowers and gifts. Took me to ball games. I'm a huge Dodgers fan. We just won last night's game. So I'm hoping that we make it all the way again. But it's because I ended up experiencing a different lifestyle. We're going to call this person Paul. We used to fly around on private planes. We used to go and dine at very expensive restaurants. And I was falling head over heels in love. And things were going well. And he would tell me every morning with a text message, "Good morning, beautiful," and every night the same thing, but good night. And I thought that this was my Prince Charming. Now, growing up, I definitely had this dream ideology of what a fairy tale romance would look like. So my mom and my dad stayed married for their entire lives. Both of my parents are no longer with us, unfortunately. My mom died of a broken heart 4 years after my dad died. You never know how long you have with the people that you love, so make sure you tell them every single day how much you care. And when they passed, people would come up to me and tell me at my mother's funeral, "Your parents were the love story of the century." And I grew up with that love story raising me. So growing up, I wanted this Prince Charming to come rescue me, this man to come and live a happy life with me. And lo and behold, Paul wasn't that man. About 4 months into that relationship, my head went through the wall. I had no idea that this was the beginning stages of a domestic violence relationship. I had no idea that the person that I thought that I loved so very, very much could turn into a monster behind closed doors. Now, everybody's standing and sitting here. You work with individuals who have had extreme violence happen to them. You work with people and you hear stories. I'm going to go into some of the horrific events that happened to me. But as you can see, I'm standing here in front of you. So there are ways to get out, and it's people like you in this audience that can help those people get out of trapped situations. After that first incident where he pushed me so hard, I remember I stumbled backwards and he had pushed and slammed me, and my head ended up indenting the wall behind me, not going through the entire wall, and he left the room. And all I could remember is I stepped forward and looked behind me, and I saw the indentation. And the first thing that went through my mind was, I have to patch the hole, not I'm in trouble. That's what I did. I patched the hole and we never talked about it again. I stayed with Paul for 4 years. During 4 years, things escalated quite quickly. I had experienced emotional manipulation, physical violence, psychological abuse, sexual violence, and financial abuse. 10 months into our relationship, we got into an argument. He thought that I was flirting with somebody else. We were at a party for Halloween. He ended up grabbing my arm, taking me out of the party, putting me into the passenger seat of our car. And I remember sitting there stoic, quiet, making sure not to ruffle his feathers or trigger him in any way. Driving down the road, he was swerving in and out of traffic. He had had a few too much to drink that night. We got back to the house and he drug me out of the car by my hair and threw me into the house. And again, I stepped forward and I looked behind me. And Paul had these beautiful blue eyes, the eyes that I could look at all the time. All I could see was black. And that's when the onslaught began. He assaulted me for over 4 hours that night, physical and sexual. I ran away halfway in the middle, and I could hear him behind me, running down the road trying to catch me. And he did, and he caught up with me and pulled me down by my hair. And I started crying, and he asked me to please be quiet and his words. And I did. He said he just wanted to talk. So we ended up walking back to the house and he didn't stop. By the time he did, I was covered in blood and bruised all over my face and body. And he had taken me into the shower with him to wash the blood off my body. And I was too weak to even lift my arms to wash my hair. I drifted in and out of consciousness that night with him holding my hand. The next morning, I woke up to him staring at me. Now, at this point, when I get to this situation, a lot of people who don't have a background in domestic violence always ask, well, why did you stay? What made you want to stay in that relationship? But when I woke up that next morning, Paul looked at me and I had looked like I had just completed 10 rounds in a boxing match. And he began to cry. And not just cry, he began to weep hysterically, beg me for forgiveness. Michelle, please, I'm so sorry. I promise I will never do this again. Please don't tell anybody. Please, I promise I will do whatever it takes to keep you. This is the third stage in the domestic violence cycle. The cycle goes from walking on eggshells to a big blow up, whether that is physical, sexual, psychological, and emotional, to then the apology stage. This apology stage keeps most victims trapped in abusive relationships. This is what kept me trapped in my abusive relationship. Now, during 4 years, there were many more outbursts, and I don't need to cover all of them because it is pretty rough just to listen to one. After 4 years of being in that relationship, I finally escaped. Now, I escaped because I finally reached a breaking point. And typically in an abusive relationship, there needs to be a breaking point. I remember my friends and my family multiple times knew something was wrong, even though I never admitted it. And they asked me multiple times to leave Paul. I couldn't. I tried. I left 5, 6, 7 different times, packing my car, unpacking my car, coming back. Well, finally, my breaking point was when I found out he was having affairs on me. For some reason, subconsciously, I was accepting the fact that he was physically, psychologically, sexually, and financially controlling my life. And I was accepting it. But when I found out that he was cheating on me, that's when I had this aha moment in my life. That's when I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I am putting myself through this. I am stronger than this. My mom, my dad raised me to be a strong, independent woman. They raised me to speak my mind. I escaped. And when I escaped that situation, I didn't understand what it was that I was facing. I didn't realize the PTSD that comes along with that type of trauma. And I ended up sitting in front of my computer, very similar to what we had to do during the beginning stages of COVID, sitting and doing Zoom calls. And I began to document what happened to me. And I started to write. And when I started to write, it came out in a play format at first. I ended up writing and performing a 65-minute solo play about my experience in domestic violence, debuting that in 2016 at the Whitefire Solo Fest, and later on that year at the Hollywood Fringe Festival. The play wasn't the astonishing part. The rehearsals, day in and day out, the going through the abuse on stage and beating myself up on stage, that wasn't even the astonishing part. It was what happened after I performed. People started coming up to me. So many people telling me their experiences of domestic violence, about their husband, their brother, their sister, their mother, their neighbor, themselves, who have gone through what I portrayed on the stage. And I knew I had to do something even more. I knew that because I was able to heal, I could then help other people overcome overcome the challenges of domestic violence and abuse. In 2017, I founded a nonprofit organization called Unsilenced Voices. We currently operate in Ghana, Sierra Leone, Rwanda, and we're doing a domestic violence, human trafficking awareness tour in the United States in 9 cities next year. Now, yes, that's awesome, but because I chose to speak up, I then could start impacting thousands of people around me. The people that you deal with, helping them to be able to use their voice to speak up against the injustices that they're going through will help heal them. We teach a philosophy that you have to feel in order to heal. We'll cover that a little bit later. I then wrote my first book, But I Love Him. Now, I am going to give away a free copy of that book. And the text message that was up here earlier, the first person who actually texts that, so it's texting UNITE, U-N-I-T-E, to 26786. Might want to write it down, you guys. Everybody's just staring at me. Okay, so UNITE, or you can use your phone right now and just text to 26786. The first person will win a free copy of this, and everybody else gets steps to talk with your patients, to talk with the people around you on how to overcome specific challenges like domestic violence in their lives. So from there, I ended up starting to speak all around the world. I spoke in LA. I actually was stuck in Egypt, March of 2020, speaking about domestic violence and women's empowerment when the world shut down. That was crazy. But so many people experience this type of violence. We're talking 1 in 4 women in the US experience domestic violence. 1 in 7 to 9 men in the US experience domestic violence. We don't talk about this often, but 1 in 5 boys have been sexually assaulted. Those 5 boys turn into men. And there's 2 directions that somebody who's hurt can go into. You repeat the cycle, or you choose to stand up against it. Same thing with women. We keep attracting the same type of individuals in our lives because we don't tend to heal what is going on underneath. And this is why I'm here, to help us teach people to heal so we stop the cycle. Because if we stop the cycle, then we're going to be able to stop the abuse. And if we stop that, then we're going to have a happier, healthier place to live. Now, you have to think that 1/3 of the women around the world experience this. We're in a small town. I grew up in a small town. Oftentimes, people don't think that this has happened in their small town. No, this doesn't happen here. What are you talking about? Not in Iowa, not in Sheldon, Iowa. But it does. When you look around, even with the people in this room, you have to think that 1/6 of this room has experienced something violent. Domestic violence, sexual abuse, to some level. And if we want to stop the epidemic, we have to start talking about the statistics. So why don't we go ahead and dive into the education part now, because I don't want to continue boring you with my story. And we're going to start talking about how we can make a difference. So what are some core issues that we're facing? There are many, right? Especially with abuse. So there are multiple types of abuses, and let's cover them one by one. First, physical abuse. This one is easy to identify. Physical abuse has bruises, pain points. You literally can see physical violence most of the time on somebody. My abuser used to grab me by my arms a lot. The first time he assaulted me so bad, he started leaving bruises all over my face. That first incident that I talked about, when I woke up, my eye was completely red and the other one was black and blue. He learned very quickly not to leave bruises on my face. He started leaving bruises on my arm, and I started wearing long sleeve shirts. Started leaving bruises in other areas that people couldn't see. Physical violence you typically can see And if they're in a relationship for a long period of time, typically the abuser starts to show signs of physical violence in other areas. So just be aware of that. Emotional and verbal abuse. Now this is different than psychological abuse. Emotional abuse is saying, you're stupid, you're fat, you can't do anything. For me, my abuser would tell me that I was insignificant, that I could never find anybody like him, that I was lucky to be where I was. Now, that is much different than psychological abuse. Psychological abuse is threats, threatening to kill you, threatening to kill your friends, threatening to hurt the people around you, including your children. So for me, when my abuser started threatening me that he would tie 2x4s to my feet and throw me over the boat in the middle of the Pacific Ocean if I were to say anything, that is psychological abuse. He oftentimes would tell me, and the people that I work with, I hear the same types of stories, that if you say anything, if you speak with your tongue, then they're going to hurt your family members, hurt your children. That's psychological abuse and manipulation. Economic abuse. This is a part that people don't talk about very often. Financial abuse is a huge component of domestic violence. So domestic violence, like I said, could be a man or a woman. It doesn't always have to be the women being the victims. You don't have to be black or white or brown or purple or from any socioeconomic background. Affluent people experience domestic violence just as much as people who are in underprivileged areas. Financial abuse is abuse where they start to control what you do. They tell you where you can spend your money, who you can spend your money on or with. In my specific situation, my abuser wouldn't allow me to have a job. Now, me growing up in a household where my parents would always support me and hooray me to do whatever it is that I wanted to do, not working for me, I wanted to pull my hair out. I got very frustrated, which led to even more arguments because the walking on eggshells part of the relationship, I had a hard time biting my tongue, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and it made me realize my situation quicker. But that economic abuse was he would buy me a car, and then he sold my car to my friend for $2,000 that wanted to run it over with a cat. He gave me credit cards that I could use, but there were credit cards that were in my name, and I was financially responsible for them, even though I didn't have an income coming in. I wasn't allowed to have cash. So oftentimes when I was putting away his clothes, I would feel in his pockets if there was any cash, and I actually took that so I had cash to use. Now my abuser was very successful. At one point we were making upwards of $150,000 a month. I got in trouble for spending $300 at the grocery store. Financial abuse is a huge part of domestic violence. They control you. Control is a huge aspect of this type of injustice. Next, stalking. So when I escaped, I ended up moving to a place with a couple of friends in Los Angeles. I made sure that my name was not on utilities. I made sure that he couldn't find me if he looked me up, couldn't find my address. But I remember I was working as a bartender back then. And I remember getting off of work at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I lived on the 3rd story of an apartment complex. And I would park my car in a gated community and get in that elevator. And my heart started pounding every single time I would get off of work at 3 a.m. in that elevator. Because I would think that on level 3, when I got off, he would be standing there with a Glock, or somebody that he hired would be standing there to kill me. Stalking. He messaged me on Facebook multiple times. He tried to reach out to me multiple times. It wasn't until he put another girl's head through a window when he stopped trying to contact me. Up until then, he wanted to silence. He didn't want me talking about this. And after some legal battles, I still can never mention his name in public. But I fought to be able to talk about what happened to me and write a book and to be able to travel all over the world and talk about these injustices. Stalking is huge. It scares you. The psychological manipulation that they do to you is very, very real. Although us looking at a survivor would be like, that's not going to happen. It's unrealistic. But to them, it is very realistic. Say you're dealing with a client who has been in a domestic abusive relationship for 10 plus years. That means 10 years of their lives, they have been listening to the same type of abuse over and over and over again. You can't stop listening to that type of abuse until you break free, talk about it, go into some type of traditional or non-traditional therapies, counseling, but speak with your tongue or write with your hand. You have to get it out of you, or you will continue replaying things over and over and over again in your mind and think that all of the lies that the abuser told you will actually come true. Next, cyber stalking. Now this is a new one. This is new within the last 15 years. And this has a lot to do with the younger generation. So I'm talking to about 60% of the room right now. Cyber stalking is something where your abuser will go onto social media sites, even pretend to be somebody else and befriend you. This is the same type of situation on how we get child and children into abusive human trafficking things. This is how stalkers and pedophiles try to reach victims, cyber stalking. This is also a way and a maneuver for an abuser to go after the ones that they have been abusing or ones plural. Combination, of course, it's not just one. It never is just one. And it's extremely unfortunate that it's never just one. Combination can be psychological, can be physical, can be emotional, can be the cyber stalking, can be all sorts of things, including sexual abuse. So the reason I left sexual abuse for the last is because there's all different kinds of sexual violence, and that's what we're going to get into next. So, stranger rape. This is when somebody is assaulted, and it's typically a woman. So 1 in 4 women in the United States, including people in Iowa, have been sexually assaulted. Stranger rape is when somebody you don't know attacks you, which is different than blitz, because a blitz, it'll be forceful, it will be painful, it will beat you up, it will be a lot very similar to the physical violence and domestic violence with a blitz sexual assault. With a stranger rape, it's typically covering your mouth, trying not to physically assault you as much, except for sexually. Contact sexual assault. So this is when you know the person. Oftentimes, this is one of the most common forms of sexual violence. Contact sexual assault. This could be friends, this could be neighbors, this could be somebody that you know, an acquaintance, where they have come at you and you are then sexually assaulted by them. Home invasion, somebody who barges into your house to assault you. This could be somebody that you know or somebody that you don't know. It's typically people that you do know or somebody who has been stalking you in order to achieve what they want. Acquaintance rape. Now this is your friend's friend. Say you go to a party. Now, I know a lot of us have gone to parties before. I don't think this is a dry county, please correct me if it is. Okay, so you go to a party and your girlfriend introduces you to somebody. And hi, nice to meet you, whatever. You don't talk to them again. But then you are later assaulted by that person. This is also another common form of sexual assault. Child sexual abuse. Now this is really bad. I do have some notes on child sexual abuse because I do not want to miss anything important. So I went to India with an organization called Back to Back when I was younger, so 2016. And when I was there, we were helping young children in India go to school, young orphans. Now, every 12 seconds right now, because of the pandemic, children are becoming orphans and involved in human trafficking. So human trafficking is a $150 billion industry, billion with a B, worldwide. $99 billion of the $150 billion are specifically for child sex trafficking. There are 40 million human trafficking cases in the world, and 25% of them include children. People think human trafficking doesn't happen here. Why would somebody come to Iowa, right? That's not true. In 2018, in the US, over half of the human trafficking cases were only children involving sex. So you have to think that 10 million kids worldwide, it's more upwards of 18 million children worldwide are experiencing human trafficking. 10 million of those are sex. In the United States alone, we are seeing upwards of 200,000 to 300,000 children being trafficked within our borders, in our backyards. Child sexual abuse is a huge, huge issue. We have to talk about what's happening. We know it's happening, and sometimes we think that it's not happening here, but it is. And unfortunately, all of these children that go missing every single day are getting introduced into human trafficking rings. Children are used 20 to 30 times per day. One of our partner organizations is the Child Liberation Foundation. They travel all over the world rescuing children from human trafficking. They said the typical age for a child to get involved with human trafficking is 12 to 14, but they have rescued children as young as 3 that were being used for sex. How do we stop this? We use our mouth to talk about it. Statutory rape is another form of rape. In some counties and countries and states, the statutory laws all differ. So in the state of California, I know that you are not allowed to have sex with another minor. So say you're 16 and you want to have sex with another 16-year-old, it's against the law. Statutory rape is a huge issue when you start talking about the person being over 18. Now, this could be men or women. We've heard a lot of stories of female teachers having affairs with their male students. This is still considered rape, even if it is consensual. Spousal and partner rape. Now, I traveled to Africa a lot. I remember when I was in Sierra Leone, I ended up talking about spousal rape, and all of the women, there was about 50 of them in the crowd, started laughing at me. And I asked why. I was unfamiliar that they didn't recognize this form of rape as actual rape. This happens here in our country. Oftentimes women, especially in domestic violence situations, don't want to have intercourse with their husband at that moment, whether they are tired or sick, whatever that is, and sometimes they're forced. Men also can be forced into sex without their consent. Women tend to think that that can't happen, but it definitely can. It's just a muscle. So when you entice the muscle, then you can do what you want at will. So this is something that has long-lasting implications. Sexual and physical violence have longer-lasting implications than that of even physical abuse. The abused will think about those situations over and over and over again in their head. The physical violence, bruises and scars typically heal. The emotional and sexual are more internal scars, where it's even more difficult to overcome. Incest. Now, we actually see this in a lot of underprivileged communities, and smaller rural towns. Incest could be forced, could be consensual. Oftentimes it is forced, brother-sister, father-daughter, another form of sexual violence. Serial rape, this is of course when you start hearing statistics about the rapist who goes out 26 times and has 26 different types of victims, another form of sexual violence. Substance facilitated rape. This is often how pimps will get their victims trapped in human trafficking. So substance could be any form of illegal or legal substance that is used to control and manipulate the person. Well, substance rape, oftentimes after a pimp will court you, buy you things, tell you you're beautiful, take you and to special plays and events, fly you around in planes, whatever that looks like, whether you are 12 years old or whether you're 19 years old. And then all of a sudden there is some horrific event that happens in human trafficking. And that event typically is a gang rape or some form of substance facilitated rape, where not only the perpetrator, but the perpetrator's friends and acquaintances will also hurt the victim. And at that moment, then the perpetrator will use everything that they have done for the victim against them. And this is why domestic violence and human trafficking are so closely related, and start to manipulate you. You have to pay me back. This is what you have to do now. But this is typically how a lot of victims get trapped in this type of relationship. Multiple perpetrator, we just talked about that. And then of course, sexual harassment and date rape. So a lot of people end up going on dates. They like the person, and date rape typically will use some type of substance as well. It doesn't have to be that way. It could be forced. This could be also an acquaintance rape, so on. So more statistics, here we go. Domestic violence during COVID. Now that we've learned a lot of the abuses that happen, let's talk about what's going on right now. So FTT is a partner organization. I was privileged to speak at the Capitol October 1st with this organization at a domestic violence rally. During COVID, domestic violence has increased by 30%. In LA County, domestic violence calls have increased by 30%. And in Iowa, every single month, 28% more calls to domestic violence hotlines. Why is that? A lot of people are very confused. You may not be, but some people are. When you trap people in a house together, when one of them is already violent, heightened frustrations will cause them to lash out even more. This is why we're seeing so many different people being physically and emotionally implicated by COVID and domestic violence during this time. When you are already trapped with an abuser, whether you're a child or an adult, typically the abuser will abuse more. There's nothing else tangible for them to do with their hands, with their time, so they typically will assault you again and again. The walking on eggshells part of the domestic violence cycle is when people tend to try not to trigger that person. Unfortunately, when you're at home with that person all the time, anything you do, from picking up the remote control to brushing your hair, will end up triggering your abuser. The stresses that people go through because of being trapped will increase the intimate partner violence. Now, like I said, I like to have interaction. So, is everybody still with me right now? Yes, okay, got it. How has the pandemic affected you? What I want to do is, at the tables that we're sitting at, talk briefly, very briefly, because I know I don't have very much time up here, maybe another hour. And we're going to talk about things that have impacted you regards to domestic violence and sexual abuse during COVID. So we're going to take a couple of minutes, introduce yourselves to your tables, and I'm going to kind of walk around and listen and then come back on the stage. Is that fair? Turn inwards. Inwards. Okay, here we go. Yeah, all done. We got 60 more seconds, guys. Finish your last thought. Everybody ready? Ready to switch it up for 1 minute of excitement during all of this craziness that we're talking about right now? So whose phone number ends in 0677? You want Yay! See, this is like so fun, right? You win a chance to win a iPhone. Yay! See, you can win stuff. Very, very fun. All right. So we've done a lot of talking about domestic violence, and we've done a lot of talking about abuse and COVID. Why don't we dive into some suicide and mental health? Okay, I saw people sigh, I've heard some people sigh right here. Okay, so this is going to be a big topic. So, 47% increase to hotlines around the United States, and this just says around the Christian Mental Services June, but nationwide because of the pandemic to hotlines. People don't understand the implications of people being trapped in their homes with one another without social interaction, without being able to communicate with other people except for Zoom or other virtual platforms where you can't physically touch, smell, taste. You can't see facial expressions. This is why we're having such a large issue with children in schools and masking right now as well. That's another topic that we don't need to get into right now. But there are a lot of mental implications that are happening. There's a lot of calls to suicide hotlines, but there has not been a huge increase except for juveniles. Kids, we're talking about our children now. So although us adults are trapped at home, we typically have a job that we're working from home. We are on a Zoom call, even though we hate it. We're dressed from our shorts to our face. Yes, I hear a lot of laughter because it's so true. I remember being in pajama shorts most of the time and slippers dressed from here on up. And sometimes when you stand up, you're always like, oh shoot, I totally forgot the camera is on, right? Adults typically have something to do. Now, when things were closed, when schools were closed, when activities were closed, students can't sit in front of a computer and try to learn day in and day out. Typically, they need some type of interaction with one another, and that interaction is live. So kids right now feel stuck, feel trapped, feel like there are no ways to get out. So a lot of kids are choosing suicide. Up in North Idaho, when I'm from, very small town, very similar to where we are now, Sandpoint, Idaho. My cousin is in high school there, and my cousin's friends, one of her girlfriends shot herself in her head outside of her house. My cousin's other friend hung herself in their house. That's just 2 instances of suicide in a very small town because they don't know what to do. And also, when kids are trapped at home with abusive parents, with situations that they can't get out of, they feel like there are no other options. So we need to start talking about this. The death rate of COVID is high, yes. The death rate of the mental health that is happening to our children is going to be 10 times higher. Now, this is not a statistic, this is more of a theory. There are a lot of individuals that I know that contact me who are under 18 years old, who are 18, who talk about how they're depressed and lonely and they cry every day and their boyfriends don't like them or their girlfriends want to leave them and they can't see each other and their parents are constantly fighting and arguing and it's something that we need to talk about and address. Depression between 16 to 39-year-olds have increased by 20%. That's worldwide, including here. Now, we are fortunate in Iowa that you guys don't have as harsh of restrictions as other places. However, you are still experiencing some of these suicides. You're experiencing people who feel helpless, who have an increase in anxiety, an increase in stress, and an increase in depression. Now, with suicide and COVID and domestic violence, how does that all come together? And then we're going to talk about some fun, happy things on how we can help. Okay, sound good? Okay. So, With frustrations at home, perpetrators are more likely to abuse. So whether that is pedophilia, whether that is domestic violence, whether that is trafficking. Here's another horrible statistic. 40% of children who are being trafficked are trafficked by family members. I personally know a gentleman. He has not publicly come out, so I'm not going to say his real name. We're going to call him Bart, right? Bart is a public speaker, a public figure, does very, very well. And he was passed around in a sex ring starting at the age of 6 by his father. So it's not unlikely. And he grew up in a small town just like I did. Pedophilia and porn, the porn industry, especially when it comes to child porn, are huge reasons why this is happening. The #1 consumer of human trafficking in the world are white American men. That means that these men are doing it within our borders and also traveling overseas to Taiwan and China and other countries to purchase children. So more likely to abuse also means more likely to abuse others and other children. Anxiety disorders, depression, all of these have increased exponentially compared with the same period last year. So when we're talking about mental health because of COVID, mental health is a huge reason to stay in the business you're in now because you are not going to go out of a job. And it's funny and not funny, right? Because you have secure work because other people are going through so much pain. We need to be able to help them. And because of school and work closures during the pandemic, mental health disorders have increased from 36 to 41%. I think that statistic is low. I think that statistic is more like 50%. So now we can have some fun, okay? We have all of this rough talk, so now we're going to interact with each other and have some fun. So what can we do? We are in this space for a reason. We want to help other people. We want to use my story, other people's stories, your stories to make a difference. So how can we do that in a tangible way that people can understand? So I'm going to start talking about steps. I've got 4 specific steps that I feel can help anyone going through similar situations as I did, even mental health disorders. And when we talk about child abuse, as long as children start to implement some of these things, and then they can start to understand that there are ways and there are people that can help them. So, recognize. Accepting. Accepting is the hardest thing. So, growing up, I didn't realize that there was something called alcoholism. So when I was numbing pain as a child, I began drinking at 16 years old. Now, I first had to accept that I was an alcoholic before I could move on, right? Before I could actually heal myself in that arena. It's the same thing with abuses and domestic violence in particular. Somebody has to accept, understand, and realize what it is that they're going through. So when I was involved in my abusive relationship, I had no idea what it was that I was facing. None. I thought that this was the way of life, that I had triggered him, that it was my fault, that I was very sorry, and that he wouldn't do it again because I believed his lies. I couldn't accept the fact that it was cyclical, that although he apologized and told me over and over and over again that he wouldn't do it again, it still happened. When I escaped that relationship, I had to realize what I was facing. So when I started to write, and I started to just write out what happened, I don't exactly know why I did that. I am a huge advocate for writing therapies, stream of consciousness writing, whatever that looks like, but putting pen to paper and getting out your feelings and experiences. When I did that and read it back to myself, that's when I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is me that I'm reading about. How could this be me? I was shocked, but I first had to realize and accept it. Accepting it doesn't mean that it was my fault. Accepting it means that I had gone through X, so Y happened. I had gone through domestic violence, so I had PTSD that I needed to overcome. Simple as that. Thoughts. So somebody who I look up to because of his entrepreneurial background, no other. Whatever you think you can or you can't, Henry Ford said you were right. So when your clients come to you and say that there's no way that they can get out of the situation that they're in, there's no way that they can overcome the mental anxiety, the stress, the pain, the hurt that they have gone through, whether it be child abuse, domestic violence, anxieties, or stressors. I can't do it. If you think that you can't do it over and over and over again, then you truly believe that you can't. Now, how do you switch that? Oftentimes, in a business mindset, people will tell you that you won't succeed. Now, in domestic violence, sometimes you'll tell a friend, and that friend will tell you, you need to leave, and if you don't, it's your fault. Stop listening. Who cares what they think or say if they don't have any responsibility for your personal life? So we teach people to change their thought process by choosing your thoughts and destroying limiting beliefs. So we're going to play a fun game, because I told you that we're going to start playing fun games now, because a lot of this is a lot of pain. Give me some thoughts that people may have that will inhibit them from growth. Interaction, there's 50 people in here, we can interact with each other. I can't, perfect. Just the way I am. Supposed to be like this. No money. They don't think I can. I don't deserve it. These are, let's see if I can spell. Judge. I was graded in first grade with the best handwriting, but that is not the case anymore, so I don't know. Anything else? Too hard. It's too hard. Okay. Too hard. When people live like this and think with this process every day, they won't be able to overcome their challenge, whether that challenge be abuse or some type of mental disorder or health, right? So we need to teach that we can choose our thoughts. We need to teach that we don't listen to our Aunt Sue or our Uncle John when they have no idea what the hell is going on in our relationships or our lives. We reach out to people like you sitting in this room who can help us. There are resources. Start to think differently. It's very hard to do so. Start to listen to amazing podcasts. Start to go to amazing summits and do audiobooks, anything of the such that will start putting positive thinking into your brain. And then we move from our head to our heart, right? So thoughts to feelings. You first have to take responsibility for your feelings. So after my abusive relationship, after I had escaped, I was so pissed, so mad at the world. And this was during the point when I was also writing my play. So while I was writing my play, people used to tell me over and over again, oh, it must be so therapeutic for you. I wanted to domestically abuse them. I was very annoyed and frustrated by that comment. I was hiding my feelings. I thought that I was just fine. I could do it. This has no pain. This is going to be over in a few minutes, right? But the more and more I actually rehearsed my play, the more therapeutic it actually was, because I was able to feel through the pain. When you feel through pain, then you can actually heal, because in order to heal, you have to feel. Now, you also have to take responsibility for these feelings. It does not mean hiding them or suppressing them. You have to forgive yourself, and you have to forgive the other people around you. This is one of the hardest things. My abuser physically assaulted me for 4 years, financially ruined me, still working on fixing my credit, and I escaped from that relationship in 2016. Psychologically abused me, financially controlled my life. And I used to sit in the back of church and bawl my eyes off. What can I do, God? What can I do? How do I get revenge? Right? Which was the wrong question. It took a lot of time for me to reach a point where revenge isn't going to help. Now, we hear the saying, hurt people all of the time. However, it's true. If somebody has pain in their lives, they will typically hurt the people around them, and typically it's the people they love, the people they see on a daily basis, their children, their family members. So they themselves need to get rehabilitated. I've reached a point in my situation where I one day hope that my abuser can stand up on stage next to me, and I still go to therapy once a month so I can talk about other people's experiences, my experiences, how I have been triggered, because it's confidentiality and it's good to get it out. But I've told my therapist a few times that that was my dream. He said, that's a great dream. I don't think it's realistic, but it's a great dream. But wouldn't it be wonderful that we could all go through life understanding that maybe we hurt others, maybe we've hurt ourselves, maybe other people have hurt us, but we can forgive them and we can still work together through collaboration and through commitment to our mental health. I hope he's gotten the help that he's needed. I'm not sure. Forgive others so you can forgive yourself. Sometimes we blame ourselves for what happened. I blamed myself multiple times for what happened to me. And you learn that it wasn't your fault. And then suppressing your emotions. So unfortunately, if you suppress your emotions as a child, young adult, or adolescent, right? All three, I did that backwards though. It's called adverse childhood experiences. So I'm a 7 on the ACE chart, which is very high. You can go to ace.org or ace.com and get your number and also get your client's number. But when you don't talk about it, when you suppress your emotions, it comes out in physical and emotional ailments as an adult. Autoimmune disorders, chronic disease, chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, stress, believing these thought processes. So in order to allow you to express yourself, encourage writing, encourage talking, encourage whether it be traditional or non-traditional therapies. I work in a very woo-woo town, okay? Hollywood, California. So a lot of people want to just dance around, but it does help, right? Sometimes non-traditional therapies will work better for other people. So encourage them to go that route. Now, next step, use positive power words. We're going to have some fun again. So we just talked about the negative thought process. However, if you surround yourself with positive thinkers, with positive individuals who will encourage you on a day-to-day basis, how do you think that affects your life? Much better. So why don't we talk about what positive power words are? The I ams, the I am capable, the I am beautiful. Let's hear some positive power words from you guys. Interaction here, come on.
I am strong.
I'm what?
I am strong.
Strong, I am strong. OMG, okay. Capable. What? Resilient. So, yeah, I think I spelled that wrong.
Survivor.
I'm a survivor. I love that. You're awesome. Survivor. Okay. Worthy. Love. Successful. There's 50 people in here. Come on. Happy, perfect. Just love that word. Okay. Happy. Now, when you teach people to live with these words and not these words, you see a huge difference. Yes. So when you live with the I ams, the I am beautiful, I am strong, I am capable, I am worthy, I'm a survivor. When you live with those words, then you can really start to heal because you don't believe what all the naysayers say. You don't believe what your abuser told you over and over and over again for 15 years. You surround yourself with these positive power words. Teach your clients to put them everywhere, in their car, in their office, in their bathroom. I remember I used to write with red lipstick on my bathroom mirror, I am diamond. I used to do Amway. I turned into a diamond in a different way, but I still looked at that every single day so I could then overcome my challenges. It works, guys. You manifest what you speak, so when you use positive things, positive words, you're more capable, right? So it's whatever you think you can or you can't, you're right. It's whatever you say you can or you can't, you're also right. We were brought up with the saying, sticks and stones will break your bones, but names will never hurt you. They do hurt you. Yes, they actually hurt you a lot more. Like I said earlier, your language has longer lasting implications than that of even physical violence. And the influence of subliminal messaging. So when you drive to work and all of a sudden you see a McDonald's sign, you don't recognize that it's a McDonald's sign because you're on autopilot driving to work. All of a sudden at noon, oh, my stomach's growling, I'm hungry. French fries, McDonald's French fries sounds so good. The reason why you're thinking about McDonald's French fries is because you saw the billboard earlier in the day. So when you put these positive power words around your house, around your work area, you will subliminally message yourself, and it works. A lot of people say fake it till you make it. It's not faking it, it's just teaching yourself differently. So here are some healthy ways to cope. Take deep breaths, right? Encourage people to get the exercise that they need, to breathe, to meditate. If they're stressed and their heart's going a million miles a second, take a few breaths, walk outside. If people are in an abusive relationship and there's an outburst, especially if you're dealing with an abuser, tell that person to go for a walk. Eat healthy. 90% of the COVID deaths in the United States are contributed to people who are obese. Why is that? Because they have compromised immune systems. When you have a compromised immune system, you fall ill more quickly. When you fall ill more quickly, it's very hard for you to overcome challenges around you because you're worried about your health. So start to eat better, well balanced. Go have those McDonald's French fries, right? Teach your clients this, but in moderation. Everything is okay in moderation. Exercise. No, don't go run a marathon if you're not used to running a marathon because you'll have a heart attack. That's not smart. I can't run a marathon, right? But get outside. So during the pandemic, a lot of people were stuck inside. Now, in other countries, they were forced to stay inside. Unlike the United States, we're able to at least go on walks. So in other countries, mental health, especially in Australia, is really bad. Suicide in Australia has gone up significantly. Here in the United States, when you're stressed, when you have anxiety, Instead of reaching for the bottle of alcohol, go outside, lift some weights, go for a run, do something like that. Alcoholism has increased because of the pandemic with women in the US, not men, with women. We as ladies have been so anxious and stressed at home that we are reaching for the bottle a lot more. Now, this lecture is not about alcoholism, but that is something to be aware of. So instead of having your clients reach for the bottle, and it could also be attributed to the violence at home, have them go outside. Get plenty of sleep. How many people here actually get 8 hours? A couple, okay, good, good. I'm very proud of you. That's awesome. 8 hours is the minimum amount to sleep, guys, minimum. Most people sleep about 6. When you don't sleep well, when you don't sleep enough, then you can't function. So being a survivor, being somebody who is trying to overcome mental health, trying to overcome domestic violence, if you don't get enough sleep, then you can't function as well as if you do. For example, when you go to work and you're tired, so you get 6 hours of sleep, it takes you 2 hours longer to get the same task done than if you got your 8 hours. I'll say that again, 2 hours longer. It takes double the amount of time to do a task because your brain is not functioning properly. How does that affect the people who are victims and survivors? We already talked about this, avoid excessive alcohol, tobacco, substance use. Substance use is another topic that we don't need to cover, but in the small rural areas, meth is a huge, huge issue. And a lot of people will self-diagnose themselves with mental health and try to alleviate the pain by using illegal substances. Make time to unwind, whatever that looks like. Go ahead and watch a movie, right? Connect with others, and then connect with your community or your faith-based organizations. Now, I only have a couple more minutes up here. So what I want to ask you is, why do you do what you do? This is something that is very, very important. You are the people who will help change the lives of others around you. Remind yourself every day, this is for you and not for your clients. Remind yourself why you wake up in the morning. This is my why. I love to travel, right? This is Italy. I love to snow ski. I love to golf. Well, I mean, I hate golfing, but I love golfing. My brother is dealing with a mental health disorder right now. My brother has drug-induced schizophrenia and bipolar disorder because of his meth use for the last 20 years. He is who I live for right now. My brother means everything to me. Don't have my mom or my daddy any longer, so I am doing my best to help him. And in order to help him, I have to show him that he can overcome situations. So faith, family, fun, or family, faith, fun. Choose one of the two, but always have fun. Because if you work all the time, then you yourself will then have a mental health disorder. Daily reminder, what do you love to do? And do it often. Do you wake up every day for your kids? Do you go to work every day because you care about the people around you? Why do you do it? Do you go because of a paycheck so then you can go affect other people around the world? Whatever it is, keep it in front of you every single day. And last but not least, remember, you can overcome. And here's a quote from one of my favorite movies, Finding Nemo, just keep swimming. Thanks, you guys. Really appreciate you guys being here. And we can have a Q&A, so I guess I'll hang out right here. And if anybody has any questions, just go ahead and raise your hand, and Stephanie has the mic. Perfect. Okay. How much are your books? $20.
Are you afraid of like speaking publicly with your abuser, like finding you or knowing where you are?
So I think one day he will. He knows where I am. I know he does. I know he keeps track of me. So I sued him for domestic violence. The statute of limitations ran out for criminal, but I sued him civilly. My attorney found a clause, which I'm very happy about. And I was actually on Clubhouse. Do you guys know Clubhouse, the new app? It's like yeah, so it's an app where speakers will go on and do seminars like this all virtually, but you don't see their faces. It's all like radio talk show. He was actually invited by another speaker friend of mine to join that platform. So at one point, I do know I'm going to end up seeing him at an event. And legally, I'm not allowed to say anything. So what I'm going to do is walk up and shake his hand and introduce myself. I've always envisioned this, that all the blood's going to rush from his face. But like I said, I have forgiven him. I don't want to hurt him, but I am. It is going to be very rattling to me when he does show up. Questions?
So I'm too afraid, I mean,
Right.
to open that door because how
I'm not.
simple.
I know. I am not doing anything that is being a defamation of character. So I am not telling anybody who he is, where he lives, exactly what he looks like. I say he was blonde and blue-eyed and tall, right? Am I afraid? I used to be a lot more afraid. And now, especially because of my nonprofit. So when I started my nonprofit, I got to travel internationally. And I got to see a lot of people's pain. And I feel like I was called to do this. I feel like no matter your spiritual beliefs, I feel like God told me to continue using my voice to spread awareness about some of these issues. And so I'm doing it anyway. So one of my passions is actually to get to the Middle East and educate women in the Middle East. Because when I was speaking in Egypt, it was very, very hard what I saw. And I know I'm going to be hurt there, you know, physically, emotionally, who knows, maybe I'll be thrown in jail. But I want to be the one to start that conversation, because there are 51% of the planet being females, 49% being males. Unfortunately, in the Middle East, a lot of women are suppressed to the point where they're not even allowed to have a cell phone, let alone a driver's license. So I'm going to put on a burqa and I'm going to go have an event, and we'll see what happens. God on my side. How did I get out? So for me, it was fortunate. When I found out about the affairs, I freaked out. Like I literally was drinking a bottle of Makers a night, like a whole fifth. And my abuser would hold my hair back while I would throw up. And I was crying and crying and crying. And he said, well, why don't you go back to LA for a little bit to gather your thoughts, to put yourself back together, and then you can come back. And I never came back. So when I left, I stayed left. I got a job. That's when I found an apartment where he couldn't find. And in November of 2015, I got a phone call, or a message actually on Facebook, from a gal, and her head just went through our bathroom window. And that's when I had a real decision to make, because at that point we're still communicating, and he was still financially abusing me, and the emotional manipulation. And that's when I was like, okay, I can choose to help her, or I can choose to continue helping him. And as you can see, you see what I chose. So I got an attorney right away, and I was fortunate to find one. I know it's a lot more difficult for some other people, and that's how I escaped. You know, that was my last breaking point. My breaking point was the affairs. My last straw was when he assaulted another victim. Yep.
So if you were in that situation, how would you want like someone like us that is trying to reach out to help? So I see that a lot of times you have to reach that breaking point, but
Yeah.
obviously saying, well, why don't you leave if you're going to work? No, that's not something you ever say. But what would be something that might have helped you at that point?
Keep your doors open. When my friends were telling me, leave, there's something wrong, he's no good, and I didn't, a lot of them turned their backs. And when I escaped the relationship, I had less options for escape than I would have normally. So realize that it is a cycle. There has to be some type of breaking point. That breaking point, the victim themselves has to come to that conclusion, whether it's teaching them ways of recognizing what they're going through, or they actually come to some type of breaking point. Hopefully it doesn't reach a point where they are maimed or physically hurt for the rest of their lives. And oftentimes, unfortunately, it is. But just keep your doors open. Say, I still love you. You can come here. Yep.
It's kind of like a two-part question.
Yep.
How long did it take you to start the nonprofit? How did it go?
So let's see, 2012 to roughly the end of 2015, so 4 years I was in the abusive situation. 2016 I did the play, and in 2016 I was also a vice president for another nonprofit that worked in Sierra Leone. And when I was in Sierra Leone, I was able to talk to 2 different groups of women about domestic violence in our country. And at that point, I learned how bad it was, and I wanted to do something about it. So I thought I was going to be working for another nonprofit. So I ended up quitting with them, volunteering on Skid Row in LA for about 6 months. They didn't want to hire me because I was a survivor with a loud voice. So I would tell victims answers to questions that they would ask me instead of advising them to go to case management. And so I then flew to Oakland for an interview, and I felt God's presence within the nonprofit but not mine. And so I walked around the streets of San Francisco the next day. What do? And I had a glass of wine on Pier 39 with clam chowder, and God sent me a sign. A gentleman walked up to me and he started talking, and he said, you should start a nonprofit. I said, well, it's not the first time I heard it, so this time I should listen. So listen to the signs that are given to you. And I said, okay. So I did the paperwork myself, and we were 501c3 within a month, which is unheard of. And I was in Ghana 2 months later. So 2017. So 2017 in July is when I founded it. And I was in Ghana in, I think, late September. So it was 2 months. Yep.
When you mentioned that he was physically abusing and he had bruises and everything on the face, how did you stay away from the public eye, I guess, in that way? Or how did nobody kind of pick up on?
Well, I wasn't allowed to have a job. So I wasn't working. So I would cover my face with hats. So I own a lot of ball caps and sunglasses and turtlenecks. So the huge event that happened, which was the October event that I described on stage. After that, I stayed in the house for a week and a half. I actually took a baseball bat and broke the mirror in the bathroom because I was just so frustrated with how I looked because of this experience. Remember, he got home that day, and I tried to self-medicate. A lot of victims and survivors do that, with all kinds of substances. For me, at that point, it was some kind of pill I found in the bathroom. And then when my bruises started to heal a bit, I remember he took me to dinner, and it was on the pier because it was the central coast of California at this time. And I was in a hat and my sunglasses, and I wanted a glass of wine. And the waitress wanted to card me. So I handed her my ID, but I didn't take off my sunglasses. She said, you need to remove your sunglasses. And I said, well, I want a glass of wine, so I guess I'm going to remove my sunglasses. So I did, and she was like, oh, okay. And I just kind of walked away. But that's what I had. And I didn't really go out into the public when I had all those bruises. Canceled trips. I was supposed to see my grandma at the Herb Castle one year. Anything else, ladies and gentlemen?
What would be some, like red flags, you know, as someone on the outside looking for? I know like a lot of users are very like manipulative, charismatic, hiding it, putting on a face. Everything's going to design or some like red flags. Like
Identify.
yeah, identify.
So yes, Jekyll and Hyde perspective for sure. Like my abuser was charismatic, he helped society, he spoke at schools, he did well financially, he had a lot of partners, he had a lot of money, right? But behind closed doors, he was assaulting. Well, some red flags. The first sign is when an abuser tries to move a relationship along too quickly. So if it's too good to be true, it is too good to be true. It typically happens, I mean, I moved in with my abuser in 4 or 5 months after we started dating. Way too fast, barely knew each other. The isolation aspect, so taking them away from their family or their friends or their congregation. I was in a really great church in LA, and he moved me away from LA and took me away from my friends and all of the people who could help. And then he had me quit my job. So, oh, don't worry, I'll take care of you. You don't need to bring in any money. I can take care of everything. So I was manipulated into quitting my job. So if your friends are not working because he or she doesn't want them to. And then when they start to wear longer sleeves, start to wear sunglasses when it's not sunny outside, covering their face, timid. If somebody you know who is strong and independent all of a sudden turns timid because of who they're dating, it's a lot of emotional abuse. So a lot of victims are emotionally abused, not just physically. The emotional abuse is yelling at each other, calling names, the psychological manipulation, right? You're no good. So it's recognizing those signs. I remember I spoke at a high school in Hawaii, and when I was there, I talked about, of course, my story, and this was a few years ago. So early on when I started speaking up, there was this girl who was 16 years old sitting in the audience. She came up to me afterwards and she looked at me and she didn't say anything and she just began to sob. And she was involved in a domestic violence relationship with one of the boys in school. And unfortunately, a lot of our school kids are involved in domestic violence. It doesn't have to be to adults, it can be to adolescents. So when they're being pushed around or yelled at, if you're in a school format at all, when you recognize those types of situations, it's not boys being boys or girls being girls. That's the wrong way to look at it. Anything else? Going once. Go.
How long did it take you to get past, like, did you ever angry at the people around you, the ones that didn't try and help or say anything, or like, that just kind of didn't say anything until afterwards and the relationship was over and they were like, yeah, I noticed this, and were you ever angry at them for not saying anything?
No, actually I wasn't. It was my choice. And as much as a lot of people don't like to hear that, you stay for a reason. And for me, growing up, there was like a little bit of neglect that happened, and I grew up with a military family, so I changed schools very often. So when I did get that, the affection, the I love yous, the let's go here, and let's go there, and let's do this together, and I'm an experienced type of girl, you know, I don't need a bunch of gifts, but take me someplace awesome, and I'll be like, oh, this is really cool. When all of that started happening, I was like, no, he gets upset here and there. I started making excuses. So when I finally escaped, I started to understand that it was me making those excuses. It wasn't the fault of anybody else around me. it's great to encourage other people to leave when you see the red flags, when you see signs of abuse. Keep your door open, like I said, but really it's that person understanding in order to finally break free. So no, I wasn't really mad. I was mad at one of my girlfriends for shutting a blind eye after she told me to leave. Like I said, I lost a couple of friends because they just didn't keep their doors open. I'm in love right now. So I went through a couple of bad boyfriends. I stayed in therapy for a long, long time. And like I said, I still stay in therapy. When I say long, long time, I guess I escaped 5 years ago. So for me, that's a long, long time, but it's still very new when it comes to like mental health and recovery. But I went through, I dated a guy from Hawaii for a little bit, and he was emotionally manipulative and yelled at me, and that only lasted like 3 or 4 months. And I remember telling my therapist about that. He's like, well, you're learning, Michelle. You were with this guy for 4 years who put you through walls, and then this guy, you ended a relationship very quickly because he didn't treat you well. So I learned, and then now I'm with somebody who, he makes me laugh. He's a gentleman, he opens doors, he never raises his voice, we never yell. If we have a disagreement, we sit and we talk about it as an adult. So we'll see what happens. You know, I'm not married, I have no children, but I am in love right now. So. Well, so my play, right, was really big. A lot of people were like, did that really happen to you? How could that happen to you? You're strong and independent. I've always been outspoken my whole life. You know, I wanted to be an actress when I was young and would just pack bags and go places. And I did have a lot of people be like, well, it was your fault then. You stayed. Why did you stay? You're money hungry. So there are threads on Facebook and on Google. If you actually Google my name and go like to page 10 or something, there's a lot of newspaper articles that were written because I sued a very successful entrepreneur. And in a lot of the comments were people's opinions of me. And I read hundreds of them and decided, you know, they don't know what happened, and I'm not going to read that any longer. So yes, I had many people try to tell me I was a liar and all kinds of things. He actually tried to sue me for defamation, tried to sue me for other things as well that he was unsuccessful at. That was the scariest part, by the way, of going through that lawsuit against him. Scariest part. And then having 350 deposition questions, and he hired a female attorney to ask all these. When we were in deposition, I was sitting right across from him. And at one point he mouthed, "I'm sorry" to me. It's like, yeah, that was the hardest part. Yeah.
How do you are in a domestic violence relationship and then they get out of that one, but they just jump right into another?
You're not healing what the cause is, the root cause of seeking a man or a woman that will treat them like that. So I talk to a lot of individuals who ask me that same question, right? Well, why do I keep attracting the same type of people? If you don't work on yourself, if you don't change things about yourself or grow, then you'll keep attracting the same types of people that you've been involved with and that you are involved in now. So it's understanding, childhood traumas, their childhood traumas, understanding some pain points that they've gone through in their lives, really understanding adverse childhood experiences, why they continue saying yes to something that is hurtful to them. It's something that they're used to psychologically when your brain gets used to a certain situation, especially if you're in a bad relationship for 10 years. When you get out, you miss that person. There's serotonin in your brain, where you really miss that person, but it's not that person, it's that you miss being loved, you miss the good things in that relationship. So then you will seek finding those good things in people who are very familiar to you. So it's all about teaching yourself. You know, you've got to do the work. If you don't do the work, you won't heal. That's just what it is, unfortunately. Did that answer your question?
It's just, I don't know how to help clients when they see it when they get out of the one relationship, and then they jump right into another relationship, similar or, and it's just, they don't realize that they've got what they're doing.
That's really hard in your line of work, right? I know I'm going over right now, but I'm going to tell a quick story. Okay. When I went to India, I witnessed a lot of horrific things that happened to women over there. And I went in a year where there was actually a woman that was raped by a bus driver and 5 people on the bus for hours and hours driving around the city. And she had such bad internal injuries that she ended up dying. And I was on this mission trip prior to me starting my own organization. And I was with other people and I said, you know what? Why does this happen? Why does God allow this to happen? We're doing all of this work. What is the point? I was so frustrated. And she said something to me. And she said, it's up to you to start it. It's up to God to finish it. You start the process. You talk to them. You hope that they grasp it, right? You hope that they understand. But if they don't, they're choosing not to. And that's not your fault. I don't know if that helped at all. Yes, more. You know, I was on Soul Train. Anybody know Soul Train? I did 9 episodes of Soul Train when I was younger. No, going once, going twice.